We're listening to the Mindset Forge podcast. I'm Barton Bryan, your host. And this week, oh man, if you are in the mood for the dramatic, this is the one, because Gabe Manro, opera singer, baritone, the baritone opera singer from Cal State Northridge, who's been singing all over the world, including in Berlin, Opera Cairo, in the south of France. This guy is being booked internationally for his massive, profound voice that really resonates, goes all the way to the back of the house. I mean, this guy is incredible. He's kind of like the bodybuilder voice of opera. It's the way I like to say it. He's also a good friend of mine. We went to school together at Cal State Northridge. We've been friends ever since. And he's just an amazing guy. Great perspective. So I won't waste your time. Let's get right into it. But before we get started, there's an excerpt of him singing Some Enchanted Evening from South Pacific. Enjoy and buckle up, because this is an awesome interview with the great Gabriel Manro.
Some enchanted evening, you may see a stranger, you may see a stranger across a crowded room.
Well, hey, I'm here with Gabriel Manro. We're going to have a big conversation today. He's also a really good friend of mine. We've got a lot of history together, and I'm excited to catch up with my friend Gabriel Manro, talk opera, talk mindset. He's a bit of a philosopher. I'll attest. We've had long conversations about many things. So I'm expecting this conversation to go all over the place, and I love having you here, Gabe. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Bart. I've been really looking forward to this.
Absolutely. You're out in LA. You leave tomorrow, correct, for to start an opera up north? Is that correct?
Yes, actually, I'm leaving LA to take my wife and children, my two lovely children, my beautiful wife, up to Opera San Luis Obispo, so she can work there. She's a stage manager, director, and then I'm, for the first time, leaving them to go to Opera Modesto to sing in La Cenerentola, which is the first, which means Cinderella, and it's the first Cinderella musical, I guess you could say, that was ever written in the late 18th century. No, the late 19th century.
Good correction. And then who's the? Yeah. Everyone will not know.
Yeah, I don't know. They're not going to know.
Thank you.
Okay.
So listen. Okay, so there, we could go a lot of places here. I want to start with, something that happened recently. It has to do with you getting an agent, and within the opera world, much like in show business or anything, when you get an agent starts booking you for auditions and various gigs. It really opens things up and allows you to kind of reach, a different audience, different directors across the world. Let's talk about the agent that you got recently, and then kind of what came about because of that, some of the amazing positives and a couple of the challenges you've had.
Okay, yeah. Well, first of all, I've had an agent for a long time. Not this particular agent, but just to give you an idea, some agents you can get and there's just nothing. Nothing happens. And then this next one I got that I currently have now, it's just like a whirlwind.
So how long ago did you connect with this agent? How'd that go? Talk about the audition process and kind of how this agent sought you out.
Yeah. So I was singing at an opera company in Central California, in Fresno, which is like, not a big deal, but it goes to show you that it doesn't matter what opera company you're singing at, something could happen, Right. And he was there, and he heard me, and he met with me afterwards, and it was his first comment was because he saw that I was singing in Fresno, and it was like, okay, well, that's okay, but his first question was, you must be, or his first comment was, you must be a terrible colleague or something. There's nothing the matter with you?
So he started his conversation with kind of a negative, like, is there? But there was a point to that. So what was that point?
The point was that from what he heard and saw, it was so incredible that he was like, you should be singing everywhere in the biggest opera houses in the world, etc., etc. I mean, it was his opinion, and
Sure.
yeah.
But he heard a voice in you. He saw a presence of voice, a technique that didn't deserve to be at Opera Modesto or something. Or that shouldn't be your limit. He saw heights that you could go to if he connected you with the right people.
That's right.
Okay, so talk about, he brings you on, send you out some auditions. You had some really great moments from there. So talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. He basically set me up first with to sing the lead role in Giovanni in Romania at the State Opera there, and I said, and he was really willing to work with me. I mean, that was like immediately. Yeah, and I said, well, I'm singing this South Pacific up in San Luis Obispo, like right during that time. I think it overlaps. And he says, well, okay, we're gonna move the performance 1 week later. And I said, okay, well, I'm gonna have to fly into, it's gonna take a couple of days to get there. And I'll have like 3 or 4 days before the performance. And he's like, oh, that's great. And it's fully staged. Yeah. Okay. So
such confidence in you that you're going to learn the part.
Yeah. I've never done
the staging, everything.
Yeah.
Never done that role. Okay.
No, never did the role. And it's one of the real comic masterpieces. And as you know, actors know, comedy is much more difficult than tragedy or drama. There's timing, there's so many things that the things move fast, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a real acting tour de force. So the entire time I was at Opera San Luis Obispo singing the role of Emile de Beck, the lead in that, which I had also never done. In the evenings I would go home and learn Giovanni Schicchi, and I would just sit in the car because I was there with my wife, and so I couldn't be singing all night in the in the bedroom or whatever, and or in the house. And so I just learned it, and I drilled it, and I drilled it, and I drilled it. And I think, actually, believe it or not, I may have been also at the same time doing another opera at LA Opera. So I was commuting back and forth because I remember I don't remember what opera it was, but when I was commuting, I would learn this opera, the Giovanni Schicchi, and I would go over and over and over it. Because here's the thing, in opera, and especially in this case where you're just arriving just a few days before, you're expected to know everything right when you arrive, fully memorized and ready to go. I mean, obviously you don't need to know staging necessarily, but so anyway, I arrive and I'm, obviously I get on a plane, I fly all night or whatever it was. I was very, just getting to Romania is not usually a direct flight, there's some connections involved. And, I arrive and I remember, I think I got like an hour of sleep or something. I went to my hotel, maybe slept 1 or 2 hours, and then just went straight to the theater in the morning. And it was on stage, and we just like ran through the entire opera. And there were props on the stage, like it was all the not the props, but like all the set pieces were there, like ready to go. So there was a bed and stuff, and so I kind of knew what to do. But it was almost like the director was, hey, go for it. There we go, and we're off to the races. Now, luckily, in these opera houses in Europe, very often there's someone called a prompter who kind of feeds you the words, because the words are the most difficult thing to memorize in opera. The music just comes. And so, like every
this just to be clear, this is in Italian. This is in Italian.
Yeah, this is in
Giovanni
Italian.
Schicchi is an Italian opera.
Right.
So,
and I'm not a native speaker, so
right. You don't speak Italian, but you sing it, and you got to memorize it. Right.
Right. So what they do is they have someone kind of on this behind the curtains saying, kind of yelling your lines at you as you go, and so you have to your splitting your mind between what you're doing at that moment and what's coming soon and listening to them. But it's a very effective thing. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been done. It's a tradition that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it makes it possible. It makes it possible for an opera singer like myself to do a lot of repertoire without necessarily a lot of rehearsal.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's really interesting. So I mean, there's layers to this. Obviously, you get an agent, you immediately get a gig, singing in Romania. You're in the middle of South Pacific in San Luis Obispo, and commuting to LA Opera. All these things are happening all at once. You kind of cram, like you're cramming for a test, in your car. You get out there, you step on stage. All these things could just derail you, your psyche, your mindset, your confidence. Like, where do you think, obviously this is not your first rodeo. You've done hundreds of operas at various kind of places. What have you developed in your mindset as a performer that allowed you to kind of just like take this type of stuff in stride, understand that you can do this and be able to kind of achieve at that level?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a matter of doing, and it's kind of like this. It's like if as you become a brain surgeon, say that you don't just go in and you feel like you're flying blind and you open up a skull and you poke around at a brain. You just do it. You've done it so many times over and over, it almost becomes like second nature. So for me to learn a role like that and just show up, and also with the layering, like I'm always learning. I just opened an opera last week, and I've done Cenerentola before, so it's much easier to learn it to do it a second and third and fourth time. It comes very quickly. But there's always this overlap, and I think it's one of the things that really distinguishes an opera singer from a lot of other art forms, or musical theater, or I'm sure there's going to be overlap, but it's the breadth of the repertoire, because every opera company is doing these kind of standard operas, and also it's kind of money in the bank for you. If you learn the role, you're going to do it again and again and again and again. Whereas if you do a musical or something, if they're the classics, but if you're doing a brand new musical or something like that, you may never sing it again. So there's an idea that like in a sense there's the opera greatest hits. Yeah, there's an opera greatest. There is.
How many would you say are like pretty much across the world are happening, every year? Like, is there 150, 200 operas that are kind of like the ones that people kind of, give or take? There's always like the brand new 20th century opera, or someone's pulling back some kind of obscure, one. But for the most part, like what's the amount of actual operas that are out there that are in the public domain?
I've not really ever thought about the exact number, but I would say 50.
50?
I would say 50 of them, yeah. One of the reasons that I've done so many operas, right, I have a repertoire of over 100 operas, is because I've done a lot of new operas. There's a lot of people don't know this, but there are probably hundreds of new operas coming out every year. It's a very vital, very vibrant art form.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The output is consistent, but the really great, and if you go see a modern opera, you might think, oh man, I didn't really enjoy that. For the most part, a lot of the output is not great, and there are a few that stand out and stand the test of time, which has always been the case, because
sure.
Rossini, there are about 3 operas that Rossini wrote that people do all the time: Barbara Seville, Cinderella, and maybe like Italian Girl in Algiers or something like that. And they get less and less, popular. His first 2 are the real popular ones, but he wrote hundreds of operas.
Right.
And
nobody cares about.
No, nobody cares about. Nobody ever does, you know.
Yeah.
But those are like huge hits. I mean, they've been performed probably, hundreds of thousands of times, maybe even a million times. Be the time. I don't know if that's the case. Probably.
But since like early 19th century, you know, when he was writing.
Yeah. And so many opera companies all over the world are doing it at any given time.
Right.
You know, if you added it all up, it actually might come to maybe 100,000 performances.
Billions.
Yeah, billions. I don't know about that.
No, but I think it's a really interesting part of opera is that, like, you know, it would be like if, you know, there was like, you go see the Beatles songs and, you know, like, you know, and you think about Yesterday and, you know, I Want to Hold Your Hand. And there's like some of them that are just going to like live forever. And there's others that are going to kind of fall away. You forget, well, that one wasn't, you know, wasn't the best. And so but we always think the Beatles are the top, right? Or one of the greatest, you know, bands of all time. So there's that. So like Verdi, Puccini, Rossini, a little bit, Mozart, you know, I mean, Mozart cranked out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of symphonies. Mm-hmm. But, you know, there's the ones that everyone kind of like remembers or knows or gets played because they have the biggest impact and stand the test of time, which I think is the key. So, well,
and that brings me to like a really, really important thing. And it's an important thing in my career is along the lines of the Beatles. They, you know, before they were this huge band, they were playing at clubs in Berlin, I think it was. They were writing hundreds and hundreds of songs. Mm-hmm. Their output it's so great, but we only hear 1 in 100 or maybe 1 in 1,000 songs that they wrote, and we think of them like, oh, then they just wrote hits all the time. No, those were the select pieces that they
right. Those were the 12. Well, you know, McCartney would bring a song, play it for John Lennon. And he'd be like, it's too sappy. He'd throw it away. And the same thing, like they'd be bringing ideas to each other, and they'd throw a lot of them out, or they'd give them a lot away. Like there's a band called Badfinger that McCartney wrote songs that like didn't make the cut on the White Album, that he just produced this other band called Badfinger and some other solo acts that he like gave the song to. Those songs become hits on their own, at least in Great Britain, but they never, you know, you have to read the show notes or liner notes to find out that that's actually a McCartney song.
Wow!
You know, but yeah, I think we often think it's like everything this, you know, genius, you know, artist or musician or in their case singer songwriters did was gold, but that's never true.
And so this was the same case with just operas in general. There's such an incredible output of operas and musical theater too. It's the same thing. I've done plenty of new musical theater works that they never see the light of day. They certainly never go to Broadway. Mm-hmm. You know, there's like a workshop or something like that, and then they don't make it. But also, just along those lines. So I wanted to just, because this is a very important concept for me, is that for any artist, it's volume first. Just volume of work. So especially in the classical music field, singers and musicians, they often get caught up in the perfection of the art, and so they just try to perfect and perfect and perfect, and they never get the volume of performance out. You know, they're in the practice room for so long. And it's because you get into a kind of a rut. When you go to conservatory or college, that's what you do. You're perfecting your art, but it has to stop at some point. It has to come to fruition. It has to go into the performance aspect, and you start performing. And that's when you really start to learn something. Just the performing. And that was one of the really great things when we were together at Cal State Northridge, the volume of operas that I did there. I mean, I think I did eight lead roles there alone, and that was just absolutely invaluable.
And then plus the opera workshops that we were doing and the recitals and all the things that like just performance to get us good at interpreting and creating music and putting ourselves out there for people to evaluate, give us feedback on, and so we can get better. Well, that goes to a question I have, but I do want to finish the story with going to Romania. So, talk about the performance. You're in this role, John Niskiki, the performance of it. How did it all go, and kind of what was the feedback you got from that?
Well, it went very well. I got great accolades for it, especially for my acting. Just because it's kind of unexpected when a opera singer is a good actor, people just go, what? Why is that? We don't see that very often. or it's because the demands on the music are so high that often gets left behind. So anyway, right after that, my agent sent me, because of that success, he sent me to Berlin to record an opera there. It's called Cavalleria Rusticana, and there's not actually that many recordings of Cavalleria. The last time it was recorded was in the 90s. And, there's generally...
Is that Strauss?
No, it's... it's terrible. I can't even remember that. Who's the composer of that?
We'll just cut that. We'll cut that whole part. Let's go.
Yeah, don't answer that. Yeah, no, it's not Strauss. It's Strauss is anyway. It's
German. It wouldn't be. It wouldn't be Italian.
It's Italian. Yeah, it's Italian opera.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know why I can't remember that. Anyway, so I was like, wow, okay, you're gonna have me record. Okay, this is awesome. This is like the singer's dream, right? Because you make a recording of an opera, it goes everywhere. People hear it, and then it's kind of one of those.
It immortalizes your voice in that moment, and that you've made it to this level where you're getting put out there on CD or whatever they're selling at that point. Right, not anymore.
Right. Actually, it was. Believe it or not, this record label puts out a lot of CDs, and they're sold. They're everywhere.
Wow.
I can't remember the name of the label right now, but they found, they're just, they're everywhere. They sell them in grocery stores in Europe. It's a ubiquitous label, right. And it's like out of Denmark or something like that. So I was very excited, and so I get there, start recording, and it's going well. I'm singing well. And then at some point, the guy starts. The recording engineer starts to record the orchestra without me singing, and so I'm like, that's kind of odd. He had done that one other time with the tenor, but the tenor was having kind of problems singing the piece. It just wasn't sounding good. So he recorded the orchestra without the tenor, and so I started pulling the strings, and I started asking them, "Hey, how's it going? How is everything?" And then the guy made some sort of comment too much. Oh, he was totally Italian, and everybody there was Italian.
Even though it was in Berlin.
Yeah.
It's in Berlin.
It's in Berlin.
Everyone's Italian. You're an American. Okay.
Yeah. Everybody's Italian, except for the orchestra, obviously. They're all Germans, and they all speak English. So I'm hanging out with the orchestra and talking to them quite a bit. And anyway, at some point, the recording engineer, I asked him, how is everything going okay? Has my diction okay? Etc. And he's not really telling me much, but at some point he says, too much steel in the voice. Now, steel, right? That is, it's a compliment. It's actually a really great thing, but he was saying it in kind of a negative way. So, anyway, long story short.
Quick. Explain steel in the voice. I mean, what is
steel
like
in the voice? Yeah.
I mean,
Steel
I don't know
in
if
the
there's
voice.
a definition for it, but yeah, I'd love to hear kind of what
steel
you're...
in the voice. It's like it's metal. It's this certain quality that a singer strives for. It has to do with something called squealo, and it's the ring. It's the ring. It's the overtones. It's like it's as if you hit a piece of metal really hard or something like that, and it just rang, and it can kind of, if you're real close to an opera singer, it hurts your ears. I remember the first time I ever heard it was in the voice studio at Cal State Northridge. There was a guy named Sterling, and he was a tenor, and he would go up to like a high C, and it just, your ears would just ring, and you're like, wow. And I was very thrilling for me. I was like, I couldn't believe it. And I was like, wow, I want that, And
that sound, just like that sound punctures all the way through the audience. If you think about operas, this is all before audio, this is all before technology that built out mics and all that. So their voices have to cut through the first 50 rows to the back auditorium, or it could be an outdoor theater, things like that. So there's a lot of reasons why this sound, this ability to project, is so valuable.
Yeah, it was like, it's gold. It's at the time in history when there weren't microphones. That was gold, because you're projecting over an orchestra. In the case of Wagner, you're projecting over an 80-piece orchestra, and somehow the voice can do it, and it's because of the steel, because of the overtones, because of what in Italian they call squealo. Right. And there's another part. You can't just only have squealo. You also have to have depth, and that's just achieved by the size of the pharynx and the chest, and the space here. So when you see an opera singer sing,
the deep resonators of the lower voice.
That's right. Right. So you have when you see an opera singer sing, sometimes they look like their neck has expanded, and that's because the larynx. The larynx goes down, right? It gets bigger. It'll expand, and anybody can practice that themselves. Just make a yawn, and you'll feel your larynx drop. And there's more space. Yeah. So that gives you a lot of that, and the squealer gives you a lot of sound. So in Italy, you can't really get more of a compliment than that. But the recording engineer, what I theorized at that time was that it just wasn't, he couldn't get the recording right. Because they also, the modern way of recording is also a little different than it was even 60 years ago. Now all mics are like right in your face, etc. So the mic, sometimes it can't handle it, or it doesn't actually pick it up. Like you're singing and you got all this squealo in your voice. This is really boring for the listeners, maybe. I don't know.
Keep rolling. I'm interested.
All right. Oh, okay, great. I'll tell you. So this is supposed to be facing that way. So if you're using a lot of squealo, or the ring is coming out right here, right in front of the mic, it's not necessarily going to be picking it up, because the mic can't even handle it, because the ring is happening out in the space. The ring is making things vibrate in the room. It's not happening. It's so it can make things sound strange. It can make an opera singer sound very woofy, like boo, rather than clear and concise, So that's the thing. But that was neither here nor there. Long story short, I get fired.
Oops.
I'm essentially fired, and they recorded all the orchestra to then have another singer in Italy record it.
Right. They got their guy.
They got their guy.
All right.
And I was, obviously it was very, very sad. It actually really had nothing to do with the way I was singing. My singing was good. it was my diction, my pronunciation of Italian, and having not sung in Italy very much, I was not aware of what they, the faults in the pronunciation that they were looking at. And so I went right after that. So anyway, talk about a low point. That was like, I went from like, hey, this is great. I'm like super high, the highest high of, just going to Europe, singing in incredible performances, and then just bottom out, like, they don't like me, and I'm away from my wife at the time, I'm away from Justine, and I go to Rome, and I'm just there, and I'm very, very sad, but I know there's something I have to do. So my agent sends me to his father, who is a very famous tenor, Renato Francesconi, and he's a singer of old, and also an Italian coach. And I coach because he wants me then, even despite my failure there, there in Germany, he's going to send me to the Cairo Opera House to sing with that very same conductor, the very same conductor that was conducting the recording. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh no. So all eyes are on me, and they're like, I knew I had to be perfect. I wasn't aware that for the recording there's no taking it back. There were faults there, and diction-wise, that I couldn't do anything about. But so now it's time to get to work. So I'm doing the next opera. So I'm doing Pagliacci, which is the clowns, has the famous aria "Vesti la Giuba" in it. Ridi Pagliaccio, the clown taking off, looking in the mirror and crying as he's singing and taking off his makeup. That very famous.
That's a tenor role. That's a tenor role.
Adam Flowers talked about, and actually inspired him to become an opera singer. I know. Yeah, it's a tenor role. I'm not doing Pagliacci. I'm singing Tonio, the guy who manipulates the whole situation to manipulate him to kill his own wife. Oh, yeah, I'm like
love that about opera. It's never a sitcom.
Yeah, I'm another evil clown, Right. And so I coach it, and I get there, and I sing it in Cairo, and they love it. I say, how's the diction? And the conductor is like, it's great. So I mean, it's unfortunately, it's all it took. It's sad that happened, but at the same time, it took my diction to a whole new level. And not only that, but I don't know if you remember this, but you sometimes you forget in opera, about the diction, because you're concentrating on producing sound. But I find that when the diction is right and the vowels are perfect, and we learned this in college, but you can kind of forget it, because we studied, both Bart and I studied with a really excellent teacher named Elizabeth Parham, who taught through the diction, through the vowels, through perfect vowels. And when your vowels are perfect, the registration of the voice, the way the voice works, the tiny minuscule changes that happen as you go from the low to the high, if your vowels are perfect and you sing through the vowel, that also is perfect. Your registration is perfect. Mm-hmm. And I discovered that because when you demand that of yourself, when you're in a room or in a concert hall, surrounded by Italian singers, and the conductor's Italian, and you're like, he's going to hear what I am saying. he is going to hear my Italian perfectly, even though I'm singing, opera. I'm singing full voice, loud. You're going to hear every syllable. You're going to hear every vowel. You're going to hear every consonant. Things happened vocally that were very positive. So it was extremely positive experience.
Yeah. And look, I think too, what I'm taking away from that is like a couple of things you said. You got to do the work. Like, what's the mindset? You're like, just do it. Like, it's not to rip off Nike, but you didn't spend a bunch of time worrying about if you were going to be able to learn the role for John Nischiki in Romania. You just did it, and you didn't make excuses. You just got in your car. I'm not going to wake up my wife in the bedroom. I'm just going to go to the car. Another trainer or another singer would be like, well, I shouldn't learn sitting down. That's my diaphragm's going to be, I have to be in the perfect, rehearsal room to be practicing. Like, you just did it. And then, when you got the poor feedback about your addiction and all that kind of stuff, you went and studied with a master in Rome. And then you went and it's like, I think so often, mindset of performance, we talk about this all the time. Like, what are the tricks? What are the nuggets? Like, if we just stop freaking out, whether it's positive or negative, whether it's scary or comfortable, just do the thing you need to do to be as good as you can be. And it's not always going to be perfect. Like, you went to Berlin thinking, hey, you know what? I'm ready. I'm going to do this. And then it didn't go well. Right? But instead of like, hey, I'm heading back to America. I'm going to go hang out with my wife. I'm going to take a break. I need to, detox my psyche, which others might do. You studied, and then you went to Cairo and you crushed it. So it's like, those are some of those things that like you're just doing that would trip up other people. The other thing I want to say is, like, I think I remember, listening to people like Dmitry Vorostovsky and like, man, what a voice. Like, you listen to these recordings of like one of the great baritone singers. He's Russian. There's so many recordings of him singing these amazing arias. You would think, oh my God, this is the greatest opera singer on the planet. But that didn't necessarily translate to like big opera houses because he didn't have a very big voice. He had a really great recorded voice because the timbre, the sound of his voice, the quality really it recorded well. It resonated well in that space. And sometimes bigger voices don't have that same type of recording quality. Sometimes, and you've always strived, I know, to have a very big voice. And so, sometimes, and I think that's art too. It's like, sometimes people just don't want what you're giving them. Like, you can be an actor, go into an audition, and you're as talented as anybody, and they're just like, you're not right for the part. And they pick somebody else, and you didn't do anything wrong, right? It's just, they were looking for another voice or another face or another whatever. Or they had their guy in their back pocket the whole time, and you never had a chance.
Right, and it's the same reason why this particular agent was so enthralled with me, whereas other people haven't. I've sung for agents before. I've sung for lots of people before.
Yeah.
And he was this is what he was looking for. Yeah. I was it, This is the kind of voices, the kind of singing that he was looking for, which was actually spoke very well of me because he grew up listening to all the great singers. He's met everybody.
Right. His dad was a great singer.
His dad was a singer from that golden age of opera, which was 50s and 40s, 50s, 60s. You name it. You name the person. My agent Christian Francesconi has heard them, and so that's what he is excited about. And it was exactly the same thing when I went to sing for his father. He was like, fantastic. He was just like, this is what I've been looking for. He said, this is what they say. This is the biggest compliment you can get in Italy. It's a very important voice, right? But they're saying it means something else in Italian. Importante, importante.
Like special or like valuable?
I think of valuable or more just I'm gonna have to look up more, but it means more of a big voice. It means a big important to the art form itself,
right.
you know. So
and he may have a point of view of like the art form has gone astray a bit, you know.
right.
And that's interesting. But let's go back now. Like we've kind of heard what's going on recently with you. I know you're going to Italy, correct? For was it Don Giovanni coming up soon, or is that where in Europe are you going to sing Don Giovanni?
So the next thing that I'll be doing after La Cenerentola is Don Giovanni which is it's funny. It's the most Italian in any opera. It's the most words, most Italian words in any baritone role, and that's because there's a lot of what we call in opera recitativo, which is conversation going on with my sidekick, and we're just talking, but you do it on notes, and
it's
so
like
it's a lot
opera
of
rap. I like to call it opera rap.
It's right.
Yeah,
sure.
it's right. It's before the aria. There's notes to it, but it's you're not gonna walk away humming that tune.
right. No, it's it's just talking. It's essentially talking to music. Yeah. And the reason, I was even able to do that because my agent for a long time wouldn't even have me, even after the Pagliacci in Cairo, he wasn't going to send me to Italy to sing anything in Italian because he wanted to be perfect, and he didn't hear what I did in Pagliacci and in Cairo, so he really wanted to hear what it sounded like, and so he actually was in Los Angeles pretty recently, and I sang a few things for him, and he said, oh, good, the Italian's good. So he's like, how about Don Giovanni? I'm like, wow, okay. Also, one of the hardest.
Which role of Don Giovanni? Are you
Don Giovanni? Yeah.
Oh,
the role.
The big guy.
yeah, the guy. Yeah,
the playboy.
Yeah,
which you were meant for, by the way.
I've always thought so.
You've always striven to be the Mac Daddy. So this is huge. I mean, this is coming up. You're going to where in Italy, by the way?
It's in a place called Montecatini Terme, which is near Florence. There's many medieval cities along there. I've also worked in Spoleto in Italy before, and it's right near Spoleto and Florence and Lucca. There's a train line near Florence, and it goes to all the medieval cities, and one of them is Montecatini Terme, which is a medieval spa destination, and there's a theater there called the Verdi Theater.
Wow. Okay, and that's Mozart, and that is 3+ hours of lots of Italian, lots of singing, lots of Italian. Amazing, incredible. Let's go back though. Like, you did not have a childhood that if someone like heard about your childhood would imagine you'd be singing opera around the world right now. Like they would.
I lost you. Hold on, Bart. I don't know what happened. I've lost the sound. Try it again.
Check.
Weird.
Check. Check.
That's working.
Check.
Try it again. Yeah.
Check. Okay,
that's good. I'm so sorry. You start that question again. Yeah.
So, you're traveling around the world, singing in Italy coming up, Don Giovanni, big deal, right? But if someone to look back at your childhood, some of the struggles you went through, they wouldn't necessarily assume this guy is destined to be an opera singer. You've had a lot of trials and tribulations kind of growing up. Talk about, life in your early years, some of the struggles you went through, and how that really made you, as strong and as passionate as you are, to pursue opera.
Well, so very early on, as soon as I was born, my father left my mom and my brother, who was 8 years old at the time. And I don't know if you know anything, but that certain age, about 8 years old, young, it's very, very traumatic. Me, I didn't really know what was going on, obviously, because I was a brand newborn, and I don't even remember that. But what I do remember is that I lived in a house of sadness. There was a lot of sorrow. My mother and my brother would, sometimes they would just sit. I remember them sitting out in front of the house, like on the steps, just weeping, sobbing. That would happen.
A big early memory of yours.
Yeah, that's a very vivid memory. Vivid memories of I have lots of vivid memories of them just being very, very, very sad about my father, about the betrayal and him leaving, and why wouldn't he come? Why did he just come back? And unfortunately, that led to a lot of alcohol abuse and a lot of drug abuse for a period. Fortunately, I knew life before that, right? I knew something of it, but I saw it go from, there was sadness, but then I saw it slowly deteriorate into destructive behavior, and my brother would come home from parties and he'd be beaten up and he just drunk, and the constant, constant drug use, and people would just come over and there would be drugs all the time. However, at the same time, I was somewhat insulated from it, because though my brother and my mom were, on kind of going down this path, and I guess I'm actually thinking to myself, oh, they're going to listen. They might listen to this, and so it's hard for me to really tell you how bad it was, like in terms of, like from my perspective. Yeah. And I don't know if they would really want me to talk about it, like how bad it was. I don't, or the kinds of drugs that were happening. You know what I'm saying?
Talk about how music, classical music became a big part of that.
So I am trying to convey that it was probably even worse than how I'm conveying it. Yeah. In terms of the kinds of drugs and the kinds of things that were going on, that I was surrounded with. But what was funny is that, amidst all this, there was music. There was a music that my brother listened to that represented this way of life, and it was it was heavy metal, and it was loud heavy metal. I mean, cranked up where it just would ring in my ears. I remember sitting in the back of my brother's car, because he was actually my babysitter most of the time, and we would go to parties and stuff like that, and I would sit in the back of the car, and he would just crank the music so loud. And so for me, that popular music of the day really represented that way of life. And so I found classical music, because I played the violin. There was a program at my school. It was a free program that started when I was in second grade, of free violin lessons, and that became. Because of that, I played the violin, and then I started playing in the youth symphony in San Luis Obispo, and it was just, talk about another life. It was a total another paradigm. This very, very civilized, people practicing their instruments, excellence, beauty, aesthetics, and then this other part of my life, which was my brother essentially raising me, and just loud music that with drugs and chaos and partying and brother getting beat up at parties and police coming to the door because they followed a trail of water because my brother had driven his truck to a lake and then tried to escape the police and coming home. Yeah. And then they're like, hey, is your brother here? And I'm like, yeah, okay. Just stuff like that, and he spent a lot of time in juvenile hall and dropped out of high school, etc. And so that music represented that and classical music represented this civilized, intelligent, cultured life and I kind of straddled both these worlds. And because of that, I was definitely insulated from ever taking drugs and things like that when I was young, because my brother would be like, no, he's okay. They'd be like, hey, you want a hit of this, off the pipe? And I'm like, oh, no, I'm good. And my brother was like, yeah, no, he's fine. Like he knew enough that like I wasn't going to do that. And because in his estimation, I was like a super nerd, He would call me. His nickname for me was
unfit to smoke with him. Yeah.
Right. His nickname for me was Daryl. Daryl was, I don't know if you remember, there was a movie with this little robot kid.
I remember that.
Daryl, the DAR. It's like an acronym for something. Yeah. And so he knew I was different and that I was going to live a different life than him. And so in that case, but anyway, that's really why classical music became such an interest of mine. And I really think, when I was young, I just would absolutely marvel at the beauty, and I still do. I marvel at the beauty of classical music. I mean, I will just sit there and listen to, Adagio for strings or anything by Mozart, and I just am absolutely overcome. It's transcendent for me. It just takes me to another place mentally. Talk about mindset. I mean, It actually for me. I remember as a kid that Mozart, and particularly the soundtrack to Amadeus, because it's a selection of Mozart pieces, right? And it's a very curated selection of Mozart pieces. It would just take me to another place. It would change my mindset. It would change my mindset from turmoil to logic and aesthetics.
Yeah, I remember.
Actually,
I remember. Of course, being in the music program, we listened to Mozart, and I had brought a cassette tape to Africa on my Peace Corps, and I had this one cassette tape of like classical music. It was like a bunch of my favorite classical pieces. And I put a Mozart. I think it was a cello concerto, and maybe it was a quartet with like piano, cello, bass, and violin or something like that. Anyway, I'm on like a sand dune at night looking up at the stars, and I put this on, and I'm like, I'm in the middle of Africa, and I'm just listening to this, and it's like, oh, like that's what this means. Like, as if I wasn't really listening until just that moment when like everything in the outside world was so complicated and crazy and chaotic, and I didn't understand the language and everything was going on. And it's like this beautiful piece of music just like put me in a place of just like peace and calm and just like awe. And I was like, oh, that's what Mozart really can do. Like that was, It was such a beautiful realization. And I played it for somebody else, and I'm like, you didn't feel that? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, whatever, get away from me. You don't get it.
Well, that's funny. That's funny you say that, because it for me, it's always been a something that I've had to come to grips with, that yes, people do have this experience with classical music and with opera, but it's definitely not one for one. You know, yes, and it's actually really why, you know, it's so perplexing to, because, you know, opera, I would say it's maybe 3% of the population is really like, wow, that's good. You know, that's
being generous.
And that's being generous. Yeah.
In America, I think Europe, it's high. It probably is 3%, maybe more.
Right.
In America, I would say it's like 0.5%.
Yeah. Well, maybe even less than that. But
and that's beautiful.
You know,
that's fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
you know, it's kind of like jazz, you know?
Well, the cool thing about it is that the opera houses are still packed, right? Like, you only need whatever 0.5% of the population to love opera.
Right.
You're still going to have a packed opera house every weekend, you know, in Modesto or San Luis Obispo or wherever you do it. You know what I mean? Like,
that's right.
So
that's right. But so, I mean, and I think the people that can't understand, maybe don't understand that, because I don't understand, you know. Well, people are being touched in a certain way, and you know, all music does this, you know. But there is definitely a special place for classical music, and especially for me. But I do think that it can make people transcend to a certain level, and it can change your mindset.
Mm-hmm. So I want to finish with you talking about the voice. You mentioned Elizabeth Parham. You mentioned, you know, like you mentioned some aspects of, like, you know, the tone of the voice and how it resonates. But like, there's something really special about playing an instrument that is you versus like, I can buy a, you know, $100,000 Steinway and play a basic Mozart piece, and it's going to sound pretty good, right? Like, but with your, like, this is the Steinway, the body, right? Like the resonators, the vocal cord, you know, the nasal chain, like the technique is really, really like a lifetime in learning. So talk about just like how you understand the voice, you know, your mindset around like, how do you make sure you're getting the most out of your voice so that you can truly be at the highest level?
Good question.
That's what I'm here for, buddy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first you know, you have to start with the rudiments of being healthy. I mean, you know, that is, because it is your instrument, you have to be healthy. And you and I have known singers that were incredible singers, but weren't healthy all the time, and it really affected their careers. So that's the very first thing. I've been very blessed with really good health. I mean, I can't remember the last time I was ill, and because of that, you know, I can be counted upon to, you know, to perform. Mm-hmm. But you know, so that's what's one element, a huge element. It would be like, you know, if your piano, you know, had been smashed with a hammer or something, or you know, it's not going to function.
It only worked like on Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Like the other days,
I don't know.
There's gum stuck in it. You got
right.
No, I mean, it's like an athlete. You know, if you're great, you can be a great athlete, but if you're always injured, you know, it's one of the biggest criticisms of like professional athletes that just cannot seem to stay on the court or, you know, on the field, is if they're injured all the time. It's not valuable. You can't use an injured athlete. So you got to be healthy. I love that. What else?
So the next idea is a very simple idea. If you ever listen to, I have two beautiful children, and my lovely daughter was up a lot last night, and she sleeps right between us. And she has this incredible penetrating cry. It just goes right into your body. Her name's Bernadette. And luckily, I'm very fortunate. My wife, you know, she she holds her and consoles her and feeds her and stuff like that. I just get her to sleep, and then I'm able to, do the rest of the, sleep for the rest of the night. But there's sometimes when she cries all night, and it's because of the perfect production of sound. She's in a tiny little body, but they can make so much noise. She can make so much noise. It's incredible. I mean, you could hear a crying baby through walls, and it's because they use what we were talking about before, the squealo, right? The production of the sound. They
definitely got the squealo.
They definitely have the squealo. Now, what they don't have is the depth of sound, the depth, right. the with space I'm talking about, and it's just because they're small, and that's something that can be developed, space, But the most important thing, and the thing that Elizabeth Parham worked on a lot, is what she called the little low. The little low. It's because what it is it's chest voice. But we separate the voice into chest and a head voice. So there's a high, right? The chest voice is that you can hear the resonance, right? And then the head voice is or falsetto, right? It's not. There's no focus to it, right? It's so you have to have both. And Gabriel Rayoyo, our other teacher who studied with Elizabeth Parham, he talks about he named him something else. Kind of he called the head voice System 1. I'm pretty sure. Sometimes I get him confused. And then it doesn't matter. He knows that there's two different voices. And System 2 is the chest voice. And I'm using terms that are kind of universal with people, and then kind of introducing some other ideas. So, and really what you're doing is you're combining, but you're combining those two. And believe it or not, what's really weird is that the head voice or system, and this is why I think Gabriel doesn't call them head voice and chest voice, is the head voice is actually giving you your space, right? Because if you just sing like a baby, if you sing like the baby cries all the time, you'll sound like what I think more like what we heard from old recordings in the 30s and 40s. Like 20s, 30s, those really early recordings. You hear the, una furtiva lagrima, something like. I mean, I'm doing a terrible version of it, but it has that. It has that certain and then I think by the 50s, I'm going through the history, but I'm just talking here. By the 50s and 60s, I think they probably had the perfect balance of squealo and space. It was a dark sound, but very focused. I mean, so much resonance, right? And you could get a lot of sound from it. And then I think there are two factors happening in opera today, and it's the reason you'll hear some really, really good singers and a lot of okay singers. It's not great. Is the microphone technique and the microphone use has changed a lot. When they originally did South Pacific on Broadway, there was one mic held in the middle of the stage. It was acoustic. It was still acoustic art form. It was just acoustic enhancement. So you had singers like Pinza, who is an opera singer, and also Ethel Merman. No, not Ethel Merman. Yeah, was it Ethel? No. It wasn't Ethel Merman, but she's a great example of singers that really made a lot of sound because they weren't using mics. That she was just belt, and it was like a lot of squealo in that voice. A lot of resonance. And and obviously Pinza also. But things have changed through the years, and the technique has evolved, or either however your viewpoint is, it's devolved or evolved because of it. Now, you don't have to make a lot of sound. I mean, I'm barely even making any sound right now. I mean, but the mic is picking up
everything, So the squealo and that piercing steel in the voice has become less used. But unfortunately, in opera, there's still no mics. There are in some cases, sometimes there'll be an acoustical enhancement in a theater or something like that. There'll be some mics placed around just to give a little bit of more spice to the acoustic. But for the most part, there's still no mics. So when people go see an opera now, they, even compared to 20 years ago, when I first started singing professionally, the people don't sing as loud. But however, right now in Lucia di Lammermoor at LA Opera, there is a baritone there that uses an incredible amount of squealo. Incredible amount. And you're like, wow, that's different. Like, this is like people were singing 20, 25 years ago. But I would dare say that if he was in a recording studio, it wouldn't sound as good with this mic technique, with singing right into the mic, as somebody else that was singing on the stage right now. In fact, the Lucia would be, her voice is divine. It would be very beautiful on a mic. So you have that. You have this thing, the thing that's happened. So that's why things have evolved in a different direction. The voices aren't quite, in general, are not quite as penetrating. And you'd be really interested, Bart, and anybody else who's actually interested in this subject, to listen to James Levine talk about it. He gave an interview with Charlie Rose in like 2014 or something like that. If you go on YouTube and find his last interview with Charlie Rose, he talks about Charlie Rose says, I know, are you supposed to talk about another interview on my interview? But I think it's important. Okay. Charlie Rose asked him a question. He says, "Are you worried?" And he says, "Wow, we've always worried, but now we have a special worry now, and it's because essentially what he says is that the operas that are basically the operas that are very important to the opera houses and financially, and the ones that people love, like Aida and Carmen and Pagliacci, they require a voice that there are less and less and less of. He says there might be only like one or two of these people in the world, and so you can't do those operas as much. And so I worry about that. And it also puts a lot of stress on those particular singers, etc. He goes into that, but essentially he says that type of voice is not around, or is not being cultivated, and it's because he gives an interesting reason. He says it's because it's too far away, there were singers alive, 50 years ago, there were singers alive that had sung with Verdi and been with Puccini and been with all those singers, and we get further and further away from that as the people pass, and so that tradition is lost. And so you would think that the opera singing would get better, because we're living in an information age. We can listen to anything. We can listen to any singer we want on YouTube. We can see voice lessons with old singers. I mean, there's so much information there. You'd think that it would improve, but it's just changing. It's evolving. And Corelli, when interviewed and asked about this, he would say, he says, yeah, it's different, but the singing is very, very beautiful. The singing is very beautiful. And I don't know if you would necessarily say that a baby crying sounds beautiful. It just reaches you in a certain way. It touches you in a very urgent way.
What was Collis's nickname? Like the big ugly voice or something?
Yeah. La grande vochacha. the big ugly voice. Right? Yeah.
But I think it also has to do with, just to give my thoughts on this. I think it has to do with the industry. I mean, are people making their money? Like if I want to be a professional opera singer or professional classical singer, am I making my money from singing huge operas, or am I making my money by doing recordings and doing like tours where I'm with, it's me and a piano, like recital style or things. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in the industry anymore, but I wonder if it's part of that's just the people that are finding a lot of success it's because their notoriety, their name lends itself more to the smaller stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that it's always been that you can never tell the size of the voice by a recording. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't translate. And things that sound really, really impressive on a recording don't necessarily translate into the house. Into the actual opera
that was Forostovsky. Like,
absolutely.
That was, I mean, and I think also there's a live theater, you step on stage, there's so much more being communicated than just the purity of the voice. I mean, you talk about acting, you talk about, the moment. There's so much that goes into the connection and the communication and the experience that the audience is having in that moment. That is not just about like, ooh, that's a pretty voice, or that's a big voice, or that's a small voice. There's so much else that's happening there. It's just, but I will say, knowing you, one of the criticisms you've gotten from peers and teachers and who is, it's a big voice. It's a little much. Like, or
it's a little bit much.
Or just even on the side, like, I don't think he sings. I think he's singing a little big. Like, maybe you just tone it down. But I remember like I remember the Met auditions for like people that were under 25 or whatever. Like, they kind of, and they had these there's this kind of like American Idol for Met, for the Met auditions. And, one of my recent interviews with Katie, she actually won one of those. But it was definitely, I remember going to the Dorothy Chandler in LA and listening to like the finalists from the West Coast. And they were all very, very like similar in their like beautiful voice, this and that, but just, nothing spectacular. But it seemed like they, and you never really, like, that wasn't where you were going to be found. I felt like it was, and that's what's so cool about, Christian, your agent, and like him hearing you in this, in Modesto opera.
It was Fresno. Yeah, it was similar.
Fresno Opera. Now, I'm from Northern California. I know that Fresno is not a metropolitan opera capital of the West Coast. So and yet, he knew he has the international experience to say, like, that's a voice I can get work for. Because in the end, he's an agent. He wants to book you, make money. Like, this is a win-win for everybody. He hears your voice. He says, that voice is going to work. Like, versus all the other voices that are out there. So he heard something in you that maybe a lot of American agents or other people didn't hear. And so I think that's always, that's always a part of being an artist is, you think of like painters who are kind of, Van Gogh or whatever, like Cézanne. They may not have been appreciated in the moment that they were actually alive. It's only later, or it's later on in their life as they get older and that the work starts to resonate with people, and oh, that Picasso guy, he's onto something. You know what I mean? Like, it's just we have to really follow what we believe is in your case is your voice. Like, what is your voice going to be? Because you could have like kept trying to change it and make it more like what Dr. Scott would have wanted, or more like, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
like what, Richard Miller from Oberlin would
Right.
tell you is the right voice.
Yeah.
And but you kept your path. And I think that's a testament to here you are today at kind of the prime age of an opera singer. I mean, it was always told, especially as a low voice male, like your voice really comes into its own in your 40s. The low, the high, everything kind of comes together fully. So here you are working and doing big things where a lot of other people have fallen off and their potential was maybe met early and they didn't have the technique to be able to grow into those bigger and bigger roles in bigger houses. So anyway, just a shout out to your artistry.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, it's very telling too. When I did the Met competition, I went to the finals, and at that time, I was told, the repertoire I was singing was not right. I was singing Verdi, and nobody can sing Verdi, and certainly not at 24 or 25 years old, and that if I continued to do that it would cause permanent vocal damage. I may even have permanent vocal damage already, etc. And I said, well, why exactly am I even here? Why did I even get, to the next round? And they're like, oh, well, just size of your voice. So I was like,
impressive.
it's not that it's not valued, it is still, but it's just how one gets there. And then also it tends to be too that the younger, bigger voices, their voices they'd sound bad. They're not put together. They're ugly. They're kind of like all wanky. They tend to be. That's in general. A young Verdi is like the biggest kind of, essentially the biggest. The Verdi baritone is kind of the biggest voice, right? The young Verdi baritone, probably doesn't sound great, and by the time he gets to 40, 50, he's sounding pretty good. It's just it takes a little bit little longer to cultivate.
Yeah,
that's the general.
Yeah,
that's kind of the general consensus about it, and everybody knows it, but it's not necessarily cultivated. It's not. The opera companies want what they can use now,
Right.
So if you happen to be a Verdi baritone or a bigger voice, it's going to be a long path. It can be a long path. And I've been very fortunate that right out of college I was able to work professionally, but it's only now that things have been more along the lines of what I thought, hey, that's what I should be doing. A person heard me and go, okay, yeah, you should go sing Tonio in Pagliacci. That's what I thought I should be singing all along. That's definitely along the lines of Verdi, the Verdi baritone, that it's a larger voice, the large evil baritone voice. That's what I've always aspired to. Right.
And you won't be able to tell, but Gabe is 6'5", the only roommate I've ever had who's taller than me. And we were both baritones. Gabe, give me your top five. We're gonna wrap it up here. Give me your top 5 all-time baritones. Your opinion.
Oh yeah. Okay. So number 1 is Robert Merrill by far, and I think I've heard he's kind of more of a lyric voice, but man, perfectly perfectly produced. I mean, and it's just gorgeous. And he always has that sparkly, shimmering little low, the baby sound in it, with a ton of space.
Yeah.
The next one would be George London.
Oh yeah.
For just go
force.
listen to these. Yeah, the force of nature. I mean, just to look at him, just look at his face. He's like got the big like brow and the giant.
He's like the Shaquille O'Neal of opera. London.
He is. Next would be Bastianini, another one that just had a tremendous amount of squealo in his voice. Just perfectly produced. Just like a laser, a laser. I'm going to shout out to David Pittman Jennings.
Yeah.
David Pittman Jennings was a huge influence and a huge inspiration to me. Bart studied with him in France for like a couple of years, something like that.
Yeah, this summer I went to Paris and studied with him in Paris.
Lots of recordings of him.
Lots of 20th century works out there that you can hear.
20th century.
Yeah.
And what an artist, I mean, I think he brought real beauty and legato and musicality to 20th century music. He could sing anything, and you were like, no matter if it was beep boop ba boop beep boop ba, and it was just beautiful,
Yeah.
So, gosh, a fourth. No, that was the fourth.
That
the
was
fifth. A fifth one. Do I have a fifth favorite?
I think you could say Placido Domingo, because he's probably a baritone.
Yeah. Well, baritone. Yeah, Placido Domingo is definitely a huge inspiration to me, and I know it's very sad. I mean, if anybody knows the news now, especially in the United States, he was caught up in the Me Too movement, which was very unfortunate. But just talk about volume. Remember, I'm all about volume of work, and then volume of work while slowly pushing up the quality equals viability.
Yeah.
The career, right? And Placido Domingo I think he's done over 400 roles, maybe more, because not only did he do all the tenor repertoire, he also has done all of the baritone repertoire now. And he sings very well. He has sung well into his 80s. I think he's in his 80s. And he sounds great. He just sounds really great. The last thing I sang with him at LA was a newer opera. It's called El Gato Montes, I think. That was the last one. And since then, of course, he's not singing in the United States anymore. And sadly enough, I've never heard him sing anything. He just always sings well. But I think that, all the bad press and everything is really, it probably it might take its toll on him.
Especially here in America, I think.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah,
one little
he's fantastic. And I love his famous quote is, this is funny. I have a little anecdote about him. So I'm watching him sing at the Olympics the night before, and then I go into LA Opera the next day, and there he is. He flew all night to come and conduct at LA Opera. I'm just like, how does this guy do it? It's unbelievable. And he's in his 70s or 80s. I think nobody really knows his real age. And it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And his motto is, if I rest, I rest. I rest.
If I rest,
he
I rest.
really does that. And there was another little anecdote about him, because when I worked at the Spoleto Festival, I went to a press conference, and it was Pavarotti and Placido Domingo and Renee Fleming, and they were going to perform a concert there, and they were doing the press conference, and Renee Fleming looked absolutely gorgeous. Pavarotti looks exactly like he always does. Just full of life, you know. I mean, he's since passed away, but he was full of life and just looked so good. And then you look over at Placido Domingo, and it looked like death. I mean, he just looked so tired, and his hair was gray and kind of like it was flat. You know, he like kind of it was like drooping, and they were all having fun of her. And then Placido was like, "Oh yes, yes, I just came from Israel. I was conducting Tristan and Isolde, and I'm not feeling very well, etc." And this is classic. This is absolute classic Placido, right? He's kind of haggard because he works constantly. He just flew in from doing something else, and he never rests, right? And so then come performance time, the rehearsal, Pavarotti's having kind of vocal troubles. He's like, right. And he's like, keeps pointing to his throat and stuff. And then at the very, very end, I'm walking up the stairs because I was stage managing the concert. Mm-hmm. And I'm walking up the stairs, and here comes Pavarotti walking down these stairs with two of the most gorgeous models you've ever seen on both arms, right? Looking very sad. And they're kind of holding him up as he's walking down the stairs. I'm like, oh no, certainly he's canceled, right? So he cancels. Placido, he adds a bunch of music, a full scene, an extra scene, all this stuff, and he fills in for Pavarotti, and he sings like you've never heard before. It was so fantastic. So he reminds me of this character, Baron Munchausen. He's very old, ready to die, he's like on his last leg, but then the moment arrives and he becomes young again.
Yeah.
And he looked, I don't know what he was young again. He walked strode out there, and you never heard him sing. You never heard anybody sing so well.
You can imagine this too probably have a bit of a competitive nature about them. There could have been a place where it's like, oh, Pavarotti's about to cancel. I'm about to win right now, and like a spark of like, oh, this means more all of a sudden because all these people are coming to see Pavarotti and me. He's gonna drop out, and I'm gonna own this whole entire thing.
Right,
love it.
Mindset,
perfect.
All about mindset.
Let's end it right there. Mindset of an opera singer, Gabe Manro, baritone. Hey, best of luck to you in Don Giovanni in Italy. All the success you have. You got two beautiful kids, an amazing wife. I got the opportunity to be at your wedding before COVID and all that kind of stuff. So just love what's happening to you, man.
And yes. Are you going to ask me the last question?
No, I have to go pick up my son. So
I was going to include you in the last answer to the last question. So for something you did at my wedding.
Oh my God.
All right. Can I just tell you, what do you want to be remembered for?
Yes. Good.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry. I'm gonna have to text. I'm just gonna text. Hold on. Let me text my wife.
Oh, okay.
And,
all right.
And tell her to go pick up Jack.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. I know. I couldn't believe you only scheduled an hour and a half. Hour and a half. Gee.
Well, you did start a little late, buddy.
I did.
You were futzing around with the chords. Okay. Go ahead.
All right. Do you want to ask go ahead and ask the question.
Gabe Manro.
Yes, Barton.
Hold on. I'm getting a text from my wife, so I'm waiting for her to.
Okay. Yeah.
She's been at Mills the whole time. She knew I wouldn't be able to pick him up. She knows she's already at the school. Jesus.
What? That is a great wife.
That tells you. Wow.
That is an incredible wife.
You are amazing and know me so well.
That's I want to say, Bart, that's really the answer to mindset. The mindset, you don't really need your own mindset. Just marry a fantastic wife. Get yourself a really good wife, and your mindset your mindset will change.
Well, and then she lets me shine where I need to shine, and she takes care of the things like picking up your child from school. The good news is we normally on Tuesdays I pick him up from school and we go to we have a 4:00 appointment. That 4:00 is now 4:45. So and she sent back a heart emoji with kisses.
I love it.
All right.
That's so great. You were disappointing, a little disappointing, and she sent you a heart with kisses. She knew that you might be.
I'm wearing black. I'm sweating a little bit here because for just a second I thought I was going to have to drop your final. The legacy of Gabe Manro. Jeez. Yeah, I don't know if you noticed. I don't do that question anymore. That's a week. That's a season one only question.
Is it?
Oh yeah.
Oh no.
I felt it got a little like everyone kept saying the same thing. I want people to remember me for being. Yeah. Nobody's like Snoop Dogg and says like, I want to thank me. I did this. Like
that's funny.
There was never really a great answer. They were all kind of like formulaic, and so I'm like,
I think
if you've worked one up, I want you to ask it. I'm going to ask you. So
wait, the stupid thing.
Pressure's on, Gabe.
Oh, okay, there we go. All right. Well, that's really funny. Well, as you know, I mean, I am a big fan of the Mindset Forge.
Hold on. I got to ask the question.
Love the name. I know.
You know about this,
I know.
The Forge. The Blacksmith Forge. Jesus Christ.
Look at you. You're like Popeye, right? You go, ding, and then like the thing pops out.
Mindset Forge. The Blacksmith.
You know what? You forge your mind in the gym.
Yeah. No, there's irony to like a blacksmith uses iron to forge, like fire and iron to forge tools.
Yes, I know. I understand. Yeah.
And then, like a trainer uses iron to forge one's body.
Wow.
Right. Like,
but
you're still forging. Take something that takes shape, right? And you use iron to do it, and you use sweat and heat.
Well, yeah, I mean, but you're also, I think that you're also forging the mind too in the gym. Absolutely.
Oh, very much so. No, the parallels are infinite. All right, Gabe. Hey, last question for you. This has been awesome. Very much an education on opera, the voice, the history of it all. Hopefully people are still listening. Let's go with the last question here. What do you want your legacy when it's all said and done, Gabe? What do you want your legacy to be about?
Well, I think that the way I want to answer this question, I am a big fan of the Mindset Forge, and I have heard this question before, and so I've thought about it a little bit. And I've thought about actually you, Bart. And here's a good example. When I was at my wedding, Bart was one of my groomsmen. And I wanted, for my entrance into the wedding, when the ceremony began, I wanted to fly in. I said, I want to fly in like Superman, and the Superman theme will play. And Bart,
brilliant.
I was expecting a little bit like, I was expecting from the groomsmen in general, like, oh, what? Right? But, I mean, come on. I mean, that's a little bit much, like maybe that's a little bit much, What, you think you're Superman, But no. Bart and Brian took the lead. He's like, yes, that is great. This is what Gabe wants. This is what we're going to do. And he choreographed the whole thing, and I got to fly, and I flew in, and it was one of the very memorable events. I mean, everybody always says, people that came to the wedding, of course, they go, oh yeah, you flew in. That was so fantastic. How did how did you think of that? Blah, blah, blah. Right. So that is how I want to be remembered. Not flying into Superman, but being that guy, being like Bart, being the guy that just by knowing him and being around people that knowing me and being around me to change their mindset just from that. Just because the way I treat them, because the way I believe in them, the way I grant them their being, that they're changed just from that. And my own children, I want them to remember that. My wife, my family, I want them to go through life. After I'm gone, at some point I'll be gone. My children will go on, and that's how they'll remember. They'll remember me that, wow, my dad gave me my mindset.
I think they're also going to remember your laugh.
Well, that's part of it, right? That's part of it.
It's the exuberant laugh of Gabe. My wife always has she loves your laugh, and my wife has a very unique laugh too.
Oh, she does. It's hearty. Your wife's is
very hearty.
Yeah.
And you mentioned like the scream of the small child. I would say your laughter is the laugh of a large, like completely free child.
It's funny you say that, because my son has already adopted this laugh.
The big laugh, yeah.
He already does it. He throws his head back and he goes out, right? It's so funny because we were at the playground the other day. Mm-hmm. My wife and I are standing there, and there are these two little girls, and he walks up to them, and they like giggle a little bit about something, and then he just goes, and they're like,
they're like, too much.
It's like
too much laughter. It's not going to record well.
They couldn't
know what to do with it.
But I'm sure, I'm sure anybody else in that playground who observed that, I think it would affect their mindset. They probably thought to themselves, "Oh man, I want to have the exuberance of that child,"
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's a word that really describes you, man. Like you love opera. You've put your whole life into this journey of being an opera singer, and you married an opera director. Well done.
Yeah.
Keeping it in the family in terms of the focus, and you're reaping the rewards because of it. So keep that exuberance up. And I think for listeners, around mindset, I think it's the nature of what he does. He does the hard work. He does it. He learns. He adapts. He believes in his voice. He believes in where he's going and the big picture. How many of us quit after a couple years of not quite getting where we want to be? Gabe started singing, at the university, 18. He's almost 50 now. So there's 30 plus years there of development, of success, of failure, of artistry that he has kind of in his sails that's pushing you forward. So that's awesome, man.
And it can't just, it's not just me. It's my wife believes in me, and that counts for everything. Yeah. If you don't have that in any field, as an athlete, as an artist, as anything.
Yeah.
If you don't have people around you that do that believe in you and instill in you, or they validate a mindset, they validate your positive mindset. It's rough. I mean, you can get through it, but I would highly advise you to get a wonderful wife like mine.
Get a team. It starts with a coach that believes in you.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Parham, Gabe,
Gabriel
Pasos.
Can I say something about that? I need to say something about that. I really do. I know that I keep going on, but these are all the things that I things that I want to say to you.
Yeah.
That the Elizabeth Parham had the mind. When I've listened to your podcast, when I listen to the successful athletes, you have a ton of successful. They have such a rock solid mindset. They are so certain. They are so without reservation, and that. And at some point they learned that. They must have gotten that from somewhere. They got it from their father. They got it from their coach, or maybe they were born with it. But Elizabeth Parham was the one that instilled that in me, and probably a lot of singers. Mm-hmm. She was absolutely certain of how the voice worked, and that we could make a career of it. Mm-hmm. And I just love this little anecdote. She would say, that little voice in your head that sometimes will speak to you and say you're not good enough, or you can't, you're not going to get there, or you're not a good enough singer right now, or even that you have to wait to be a great singer, or whatever it is, you're just not good enough. Well, that's the devil.
Wow. That is the devil. I love it. Yeah.
So banish it. Banish the thought, You just banish it. We have a tremendous amount of control over what we think.
Yeah.
We have, in fact, it's the one thing that we really have control over. I mean, there are some forces out in the environment that we have less control over. Why not take control of our mind? Why not can take control of it? Because at least you're omnipotent in your mind. You can make ideas appear and disappear, and bad thoughts go away, or good thoughts come in, or concepts. Like it's your playground. It's absolutely your playground. So, the idea that somehow the mind functions on its own without your say, without your determinism, is an absolute fallacy. So take control of your mindset.
Gabriel Manro.
Once you have found her,
There you have it. Gabe Manro's ideas, thoughts, perspective. Opera singer. I mean, the world of opera, it's a bit fringe. A lot of people these days don't have the appreciation for opera, and I get it. Like it's it's an art form that really is centuries old. And so it takes a unique person to find opera, to think it's really, something amazing. I will tell you specifically, I did opera in college, but I was at the Opera Bastille in France as a student, and I got to be third row center for Turandot. And that is a Puccini opera. Nessa Norma is one of the famous arias from that. And it blew my doors off. I just otherworldly. I think those are moments in our life where we're taken so off guard, taken to another place, to another realm, to holy crap, this is next level. The experience, the visceral power, passion, devastation of the story, love, heartbreak, war, all of it was just absolutely crazy. Much like some people probably might have experienced if they watched Gladiator, the movie, or I'm just talking about my generation. I think Shawshank Redemption. Some of these movies are so epic that they just we walk out of the theater going I think my world is different. I think I've changed from this thing. I had that experience with the Opera Bastille. And so, I think if you're not into opera, it's okay, right? But check out Gabe Manro. I'm going to drop his website, things like that. You can kind of go to his YouTube, watch some videos. The guy's an absolute badass. And, opera can be kind of light and lyrical, and it's not everybody who can be that big and have a voice that carries quite as as loud and with the presence and the artistry that Gabe has. And I think it's a special voice, which is why I think he's so appreciated across the ocean in Europe and other places is that voice is something that's really comes from a tradition of operas, Strauss, Wagner, Puccini too, but more so Verdi. These big operas that came from Italy and Europe in the 18th and 19th centuries that require these massive voices to be able to project before they had mics and all that kind of stuff. So he is definitely a true opera singer's opera singer. So shout out to Gabe Manro for being on. I hope this was something you really enjoyed. And if you're listening at this point, you've put yourself through an hour and 45 minutes of my podcast. So I thank you for that. It's a huge deal. And so, hey, keep listening, keep sharing. Let's make this podcast even more successful by letting people know what's going on, what we're up to. Share it, and let's keep this good thing going. Thanks again for listening to the Mindset Forge podcast.